So here's where things get really fun and interesting. Okay, today's gonna be fun because we're actually talking about what the point of all of this is today. As you guys know, I love to share my journey through side hustles on this channel and kind of showing day-to-day progress on DoorDash, Instacart, Uber, and just kind of what my day-to-day life looks like working through these gig apps. But not only do I like to talk about that, but also money tips and kind of like the reason why I'm doing all of this, because the reason why is actually way more important than the actual things that I'm doing. And that's a big thing I want to drive home on this channel. What I like to share with everyone is this is just a means to an end, and everything is very strategic and goal oriented with gig work. And it's not just about doing gig work just to kind of get by. So this video today will give you a lot of context and also clarity to behind why I'm even doing all of this gig work and sharing it with the world and showing you guys how much money you can really make if you take side hustles seriously and treat it like a business instead of just a means to an end and how to pay your next bill. Before we get any further, my name is Madison and I talk about gig work and money tips on this channel. If those are things you're interested in watching, I would greatly appreciate you subscribing and liking the video if you enjoy it, because it really helps the algorithm. This is how I'm building real wealth from just working gig apps. And the gig apps are what I choose to do, and this is not the only way you can obviously do this. The bigger picture here is really about the concept of taking on a side hustle that you use only for savings or investments or to fund extra things in your life and live off another source of income as your main way to pay your bills. So whether that's another part-time job or another full-time job, whatever your situation is, just use the leverage that you can to basically use your side hustle to only fund savings and investments. And that's how you're going to get very far just by doing a side hustle. So this kind of follows up really well to my last video, which if you haven't watched it, I will put it in the description. But in that video, I talked about how much money I made in exactly 1 year of doing gig work. And this was just off of DoorDash, Instacart, and Uber Eats deliveries. The meaning behind all of that is not only is this income extremely tax advantaged right now, which is a huge, huge benefit to doing any sort of side gig work right now, because if you don't know, any sort of gig work, driving, DoorDash, all of the things is very tip heavy on your income. So when you don't have to pay taxes on that, it's literally as if you're making more money than you actually are. And what I mean by that is that you can't actually compare your net profit after all expenses to another job, say a W-2 that has the same salary, because so much more of that money is actually take-home pay. So for example, if you have a $40,000 a year salary at a W-2 job and you make $40,000 a year doing this type of gig work, the amount of money that you take home doing gig work is actually vastly greater than the amount you get to take home from that W-2 job. And this is how I'm actually using way more of the money I get to take home and those tax savings to then invest it and then build more money on top of that. So I'm actually going to put in a screen recording here of me actually buying stock with my paycheck. So before I show you that, the accounts that you need, and if you want to see more details on this, I will link a video that I made in the description. But first of all, you definitely want to have a high yield savings account. That is step number one to where you want to put this money from your side hustle. And then after that, you're going to want to put it into either brokerage to invest or put it into retirement accounts where it can also be invested. Regardless of the account type, the key that you want to remember and that's important is investing it. And at the end of the day, there are many different types of accounts that you can have, and all of them have different benefits. But if all of that confuses you a little bit too much, the only thing you need to know is that it needs to be invested in one of these accounts, and that's how you're actually going to grow wealth. So for example, let's just take last week. So last week I made about $700 between all platforms. This was a pretty low week for me. Normally I do make about $1,000 per week, and that is my goal, but we're just gonna take the most recent week and show you how I'm going to use my paychecks from these platforms and put them directly into savings and investments and actually have them work for me. So this is just a weekly payment of $700, and I'm going to show you here in the screen recording how I'm going to allocate and split these up. It does heavily depend on your own personal situation and what your savings goals are, how you want to prioritize. So you can adjust these amounts to your own situation, but this is what I'm going to do at this point. Because my emergency fund is pretty close to where I want it to be, I am going to prioritize investing, especially because I am on the younger side, and this will actually help me grow my money much quicker. And because I don't have a short-term savings goal like buying a house or anything like that, I'm not going to just dump all of these into a high yield savings account. Where you would want to do that is if you do have a goal in the next couple years. The biggest one is probably saving for a down payment on a house. That's where you would want to put all of this money into a high yield savings account and let that big lump sum accumulate over time when you know you're going to need it in a couple years. Another good one would be saving for a car. If you want to save up a big down payment on a car so that your car payment every month is pretty low. Or if you want to aim pretty high and save to buy a car all in cash, that would be something also where I would just put all of this money into a high yield savings account because I know I'm going to want to use it in a few years. So that gives you a couple examples. Because those are not goals that I have right now, I'm actually going to use most of this money to invest. The earlier you invest and the younger you are, the more time you have to compound, which truly is where the magic lies with investing. So the quicker you get started, the more you'll be able to build over time. But no matter what age you are, do not get discouraged if you've invested nothing and you're older. Like I'm personally in my 20s. And if I had started investing earlier, I would have much more money than I do right now. But that's not the point. The point is you can always start now. Having any time in the market to invest is better than none. So you definitely don't want to get discouraged if you already feel like you're behind. If you have never invested before or you have savings goals, and you want to start a side hustle to copy this strategy, I encourage you all day to do that, no matter what age you are. So I am personally going to take $500 of this $700 and going to be investing that. And like I said, I'm doing the majority of investing because my emergency fund is already in a spot where it's pretty solid, and because I don't have any short-term savings goals that I'm actively working towards, and it's mostly just for emergencies. But let's get into the screen recording, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to allocate this $500 to investments. So here we are inside of my Robinhood account. So for this week, I'm going to be focusing on dividend stocks. And this is just one new one that I actually own a very small amount of right now, and I want to increase that. So this is SDIV. So this is actually the riskiest and most volatile ETF I'm going to show in this video. I want to keep this a small percentage of my portfolio, but it's great for maximizing dividends. And I'm just going to buy a couple shares of this one. So I'm going to buy them in whole shares. You can also buy in exact dollars if you want to. So I'm going to buy 7 shares, and you can see that comes out to about $170. So now we're done. So these are all of these stocks I currently am buying. And this one I have a very small amount. Again, it's a new one for me. So this is JEPI. This is a very popular ETF that has pretty low volatility, which is why it's a great one to invest in. And you're still going to get a pretty high dividend yield off of this one. So this is a new one for me. As you can see, I only have $100 right now in equity. So I'm going to buy a little bit more, and I'm going to put about $200 into this one. So that comes out to about 4 shares at the current price. So we just bought some more shares of that one. And then I'm going to look for one more. This is SPYD. This is great to generate income, but it's also not super volatile because it is tracking the S&P 500. So it's pretty low risk. And here's just the overview, more information on this one on Robinhood. It shows you everything. This one also has a very low expense ratio, and that's great because you won't be giving up as much of your profits. So I'm going to go ahead and buy 2 shares of this one, getting me close to $100. And because I bought in whole shares, I couldn't spend exactly $500, but I got pretty close. Okay, so now that we're back, I'm actually going to take that other $200 and I am going to put this into my emergency fund. So I'm going to put this into my high yield savings account. So we're going to transfer this over from my checking to this account that I already have set up. I personally don't have a high yield savings account where it shows buckets, where I'm like specifically putting a certain amount in for vacations or for pet emergencies fees or for gifts. Like there's several different buckets that people like to use in a high yield savings account. But honestly, that is a little bit more granular, and it's great if you want to get that detailed. But honestly, it's not something you really need to worry about, especially if you're a beginner. I wouldn't get into too many details like that because it's just going to overwhelm you more than anything. And I would just focus on opening a high yield savings account, which literally takes 5 minutes or less, and just dumping money into there so that you can build a solid savings account that you can then use for whatever, whether it's an emergency or an unexpected expense, or even if it's just for like a vacation or something fun. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer $200 from my checking account where my money is deposited into my high yield savings. And I currently have one with American Express. It's just the one that I opened, and I honestly didn't do that much research when I opened one because I just wanted to open one. Kind of advise the same for you. If you don't have a high yield savings account already, I wouldn't get caught up too much in like researching and like having to pick the perfect one. I would just pick a solid one and just start putting money in there. I know SoFi is a great one. The American Express one that I have, I'm very happy with. And a lot of that also was because I did want to establish a relationship with American Express because I am planning on getting one of their credit cards in the future. So I thought it would be kind of nice to already be a customer of theirs before opening a credit card, especially one of the more premium ones, and already having a savings account with them. So that's kind of where my mind was at. But again, you don't need to pick the perfect choice. If you don't have one, just get a high yield savings account. Right now, the interest rates are hovering between 3 to 3.5%. Some of them might be closer to 4, especially for like intro rates if you're a new customer. If you spend too much time haggling with yourself over like a 0.1 or 0.2% increase in APY, it's honestly a waste of your time. You just want to get money into that account and stop keeping money in your checking account where you're inevitably going to spend it. So that's my little spiel on high yield savings accounts. And that's where I'm going to put a small percentage of this money. So here's where things get really fun and interesting. So let's take, for example, this is a number that I'm pretty much able to solidly hold, especially because a $700 a week payment is on the low end for me as far as like what I'm able to bring in for gig work earnings. Let's take a look at what this would actually compound to over time. If I'm, for example, just using myself, if I'm able to invest $500 per week from my gig work earnings, that is $2,000 a month invested, or $24,000 per year, which is insane. Like thinking about that number, it honestly doesn't even feel real. Like you just start with $500 and that it is a lot of money, but it doesn't seem like it would do anything crazy. But then thinking about what that actually multiplies to in a year is just insane. So let's actually take a look at what $500 a week or $2,000 a month invested can really do for you over time. And I'm going to put in some screen recordings here also of looking at this number on a shorter term basis and then also longer term to show you that even if you can only hold investments for 5 years and you don't want to sit there for 30 years and like think that far into the future, it's still going to benefit you so much more than you're probably thinking. All right, so I'm going to use this simple investment calculator. I'm going to put our starting amount at $1 just to assume if you start with nothing. I'm going to start out with that 5-year target, and the basic return rate is around 7% adjusted for inflation in the market. And I'm going to go ahead and put that $2,000 right there, and we're going to contribute that at the end of each month. So as you can see, even if you can just hold that number for 5 years with that monthly contribution, you would already have almost $150,000. Because you're only in the market for 5 years, the majority of this money is your contributions and not interest. But the point is that is a life-changing amount of money to have from only putting in 5 years of work. And this is also assuming that you never increase your monthly contribution. So now here's where things get interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to 20 years. I'm 28 years old, so this is for me personally around 48 years old, which is when I would love to retire, or even a little before that if I can pull it off. Now we're going to see what will happen with this contribution. So just from these contributions, now you're a millionaire. You have over $1 million from just contributing $2,000 a month and holding for 20 years in the market. And the most interesting part is now your contributions and your interest are actually about 50-50. So the compounding effect in the market is actually doing half the work for you at this point. And as you scroll down later in those tables, you can see how quickly those numbers are increasing and how the majority of that is all interest from being in the market and not actually from your own money. And keep in mind, this figure is reached if you never are able to increase your monthly contributions over 20 years. So if you just stick with $2,000 per month. And most people's income does increase over time, so usually you'd be able to add more. Well, after seeing that, I hope you can see that working a side hustle in general and then using that money to fund only savings and investments, I think is the biggest hack, if you want to say, that you can do right now, especially one that has heavy tip income. That's like double savings because you get to actually take home so much more of your paycheck. And to me, it's like whatever way I can take home more of my money and pay less to taxes is a win. Doubling down on that and not only taking home more money, but then using it to grow more money. This is how you can actually break out of the cycle, having to suffer in a 9-to-5 that you hate and having to sit there and like stay at a job because you literally cannot pay your bills. This is how you break that cycle and you actually buy yourself freedom to make other decisions in your life. Maybe you decide at one point that you have different priorities and you have flexibility to change your life or change your lifestyle if it's something that comes up in the future. Especially when you're young, your life is going to go through so many phases as you get older. So it's great to know that you have a nest egg or an emergency fund, you have savings that you can pull from, and then investments that are also just growing over time. So I hope this showed you how powerful it can really be to use all of your side hustle income to invest and save, and how that can build you very quickly a very solid footing of savings and investments, and how that can literally change your life. And you don't need 20 years to do it either. Even just a few years invested, it adds up really quick. And if you're able to find a way to pay your bills and survive off of your main job, then just have a side hustle on the side that's purely for savings, you will be so much further than you can even think right now. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you liked it, I would really appreciate liking it for the algorithm and subscribing if you want to stick around and see more videos about me going through my side hustle journey and kind of sharing with you guys my goals and how I am building an emergency fund and solid investments purely off of gig work. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.